They laughed when she sang in the parking lot. But one video changed everything overnight. Welcome to Dusk Tales. Let's uncover what really happened. The fluorescent hum of Fresh Mart was Alara Vance's constant companion, a dull, droning backdrop to the symphony of her quiet despair. For 2 years, she had stood behind Register 3, her fingers flying over the scanner, her voice a practiced monotone announcing totals. Each beep, each plastic bag rustle, was another small incision, cutting away at the vibrant world she longed to inhabit, leaving her with a bitter taste of what if. Her dreams, once bright and soaring, had been carefully folded away, like old sheet music in a forgotten drawer, replaced by the grim realities of rising rent, mounting medical bills for her ailing grandmother, and the unforgiving glare of Mr. Albright, her manager. Mr. Albright was a man meticulously crafted from corporate policy and petty tyranny. His bald head gleamed under the harsh store lights, a beacon of micromanagement. His thin lips were perpetually pursed in disapproval, as if the very act of existing was an affront to his meticulously organized world. To him, employees were cogs, customers were transactions, and the entire universe was a spreadsheet that needed to balance, preferably in his favor. He saw Alara not as a person with a talent that could stir souls, but as a unit, easily replaced, always underperforming in his imagined metrics. He had a way of making her feel small, insignificant, like the crumpled receipt at the bottom of a customer's bag. "Smile, Alara," he'd bark, his voice a low, grating whisper, even when her face ached from the effort. "You're representing the Fresh Mart brand. Enthusiasm sells, even for organic kale." His pronouncements were constant, suffocating reminders of her precarious position, the thin ice upon which her grandmother's care precariously balanced. But beneath the forced smiles and the weary resignation, Alara held a secret, a vibrant, living thing that refused to be extinguished. It was her voice. In the quiet solitude of her cramped apartment, or humming softly to herself in the break room, or in the blessed anonymity of her car, her voice was a river, flowing freely, carrying away the accumulated grime of her day. It was a soulful, resonant alto, capable of both aching sorrow and soaring joy, a voice born for grander stages than the canned pop music that leaked from Fresh Mart's cheap speakers. It was her escape, her sanity, her last fragile tether to the person she knew she was meant to be. The irony, bitter and sharp, was that it was also her deepest secret. She had performed once, in a local talent show years ago, a shy, nervous girl stepping onto a brightly lit stage. Her voice, usually so steady, had wavered, her nerves betraying her. The memory of the polite applause, the kind but dismissive smiles, had burned itself into her memory, a scar that kept her silent. She sang for herself, for her grandmother, who would close her eyes and nod along to the old hymns, tears sometimes tracing paths down her wrinkled cheeks. Never for an audience. Never again. Her days at Fresh Mart were a monotonous loop, each one blending into the next, punctuated only by the unwelcome intrusions of the elite customers. Chief among them were Ashley and Derek. Ashley, with her impossibly perfect blonde hair and a permanent sneer that could curdle milk, was the undisputed queen bee of the town's privileged youth. Her social media presence was a curated facade of perfection, her digital kingdom built on the mockery of others. Derek, her hulking football star boyfriend, was a Neanderthal in designer clothes, his arrogance fueled by his family's wealth and his own brutish strength. They frequented Fresh Mart not out of necessity, but out of a sense of entitlement, treating the store, and especially its employees, as extensions of their personal playground. They would saunter through the aisles, whispering loudly, their laughter echoing through the mundane soundtrack of the store, their eyes always darting, searching for a fresh target for their casual cruelty. Alara had learned to make herself invisible when they approached a register, to process their high-end groceries with swift, silent efficiency, avoiding eye contact, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew their power, the way they could dismantle a person with a single, well-placed sneer or a carefully timed public humiliation. They were the kind of bullies who didn't need to physically hurt. They preferred to crush spirits. And then came Tuesday, a day that would, irrevocably, alter the course of Alara's carefully constructed, quiet life. It had been a particularly brutal shift. The air conditioning unit had broken, turning the store into a humid oven. A fresh shipment of produce had arrived, smelling faintly of decay. And Mr. Albright, in a fit of rage over a missing price tag, had delivered a public dressing down to Alara that left her cheeks burning and her hands trembling. He had accused her of being distracted, unprofessional, and lacking the requisite corporate zeal. His words, delivered in a sharp, almost theatrical whisper that everyone in line could hear, had felt like a physical blow. By the time her shift ended, Alara felt utterly depleted, a hollow shell of her former self. The thought of going back to her silent apartment, to the bills, to the endless cycle of struggle, was almost unbearable. She needed to breathe. She needed to sing. It was a desperate, primal urge, a need for release that transcended caution. Instead of heading straight for her car, she found herself walking to the very back of the Fresh Mart parking lot, a secluded corner bordered by a high, chain-link fence and a dense line of overgrown bushes. It was a place usually reserved for delivery trucks and discarded pallets, a forgotten space where the harsh fluorescent glow of the store couldn't reach, a sanctuary of shadows. The air was cool and smelled of damp earth and distant asphalt. The faint sounds of the highway were a distant murmur. She closed her eyes, took a deep, shuddering breath, and let the first notes escape her lips. It was an old gospel hymn, one her grandmother used to sing, a melody filled with a yearning for hope and deliverance. Her voice, a rich, resonant alto, swelled in the quiet of the evening, pouring out the frustration, the exhaustion, the pain, the dreams that refused to die. She sang with an intensity she usually reserved for the deepest privacy of her home, her eyes closed, her heart laid bare, lost in the pure, unadulterated beauty of the music. She was not singing for anyone. She was singing for herself, a desperate prayer in the growing twilight. She was utterly unaware of the sudden, bright glare of headlights. The powerful beams of the SUV cut through the twilight, trapping Alara in a harsh, unyielding spotlight. She flinched, her voice catching in her throat, the beautiful melody abruptly severed. Her eyes, blinking rapidly against the sudden glare, opened to reveal Ashley and Derek, sitting in Ashley's gleaming black SUV. They hadn't left the parking lot after their own shopping trip. They had been lingering, probably on their phones, doing what they always did, looking for something or someone to entertain them, to mock, to humiliate. And now they had found their prey. Ashley, her perfect blonde hair catching the light like a halo of malice, lowered her tinted window with a slow, deliberate hum. Her face was a mask of amused contempt, her lips curled into a sneer that was both beautiful and terrifying. Derek, beside her, merely grinned, his eyes glinting with a cruel, anticipating pleasure. Well, Ashley drawled, her voice dripping with mock surprise, loud enough to carry across the empty parking lot. Look what we have here. Our little cashier, turning into a superstar in the Fresh Mart loading dock. Her words were laced with an acid sarcasm that immediately made Alara's cheeks burn with shame. Alara felt a wave of humiliation wash over her, cold and sickening. Her sanctuary, her private moment of release, had been invaded, desecrated. She wanted the ground to swallow her whole, to disappear into the fading light, to become invisible once more. She clutched her worn purse, her knuckles white. "Ashley, please," Alara whispered, her voice barely audible, choked with embarrassment. I wasn't trying to, Don't stop on our account, Alara." Derek chimed in, his voice a mocking imitation of a TV show host. That was quite the performance. Really, Broadway quality, I'd say. Didn't know Fresh Mart hired performers now. Is this part of the new customer service initiative, Albright's Follies? He let out a loud, derisive laugh, a harsh, grating sound that echoed through the quiet parking lot. Ashley's hand, impeccably manicured, rose slowly. Alara saw the glint of the smartphone, its camera lens pointed directly at her, recording. A cold dread settled in her stomach. Just gotta capture this for posterity, you know? Ashley purred, her eyes alight with a malicious glee. Our little Freshmart nightingale, belting out gospel tunes in the trash alley. This is priceless. The internet is going to love this. Alara's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of panic. She was exposed, vulnerable. The worst possible version of her secret, her deepest comfort, was being twisted, mocked, and broadcast to the world. She wanted to scream, to run, to lash out, but she was frozen, paralyzed by the sheer, overwhelming humiliation. "Please don't," Alara pleaded, her voice cracking, tears welling in her eyes. "Please don't post that." Ashley merely smiled, a slow, triumphant smirk. "Oh, honey, too late. The world needs to see this. You're going viral, sweetie. Get ready for your 15 minutes of fame." Derek let out another booming laugh, and then, with a final, contemptuous glance, Ashley put the SUV in reverse, the tires spitting gravel, and sped away, leaving Alara alone in the lingering glow of their headlights, exposed, humiliated, and utterly broken. The silence that settled over the parking lot afterward was colder, heavier, more profound than before. It felt like the silence after a public execution. Alara stood there for a long time, the echo of their laughter ringing in her ears. The phantom glare of the camera lens burned into her vision. The rain had started again, a soft, sympathetic drizzle that mingled with the tears now freely streaming down her face. She felt utterly naked, stripped bare of her last private solace. Her voice, her most cherished secret, had been turned into a weapon against her, used to amplify her humiliation and deepen her despair. She thought of her grandmother, her quiet strength, her unwavering faith. She thought of Mr. Albright's contempt, his constant threats to her livelihood, and she knew, with a chilling certainty, that her carefully constructed world, already so fragile, was about to come crashing down. Ashley's words, "You're going viral," resonated in her mind, a terrifying prophecy of public shame. She could already feel the eyes of the internet on her, thousands of anonymous faces laughing, pointing, judging. Her heart clenched, a painful, desperate knot. The Freshmart parking lot, once her secret stage, had become her public gallows. The quiet dreams she had held so close were not just shattered. They were ridiculed, their fragments scattered for the world to see, mocking her with their broken beauty. She had been foolish to let down her guard, to believe that any corner of her life could remain untouched by the cruelty of the world. Now, she would pay the price. The following morning, the internet, a relentless and unforgiving beast, devoured Alara's private humiliation and regurgitated it for public consumption. Ashley had indeed posted the video, a short, grainy clip of Alara singing in the parking lot, punctuated by Derek's derisive laughter and Ashley's mocking commentary. It was titled, with chilling specificity, "Freshmart Cashier's Midnight Melodies LOL." The video spread like a toxic wildfire through the local social media circles, then leaped to regional platforms, and within hours began its inexorable crawl into the wider, anonymous expanse of the internet. Alara awoke to a nightmare. Her phone, usually silent save for her grandmother's daily check-ins, buzzed incessantly with notifications. Text messages from acquaintances, some sympathetic, most filled with an uncomfortable curiosity. Anonymous comments flooding her social media accounts, ranging from cruel laughter to dismissive judgment. Screenshots of the video, with ugly captions and emojis, appeared on local gossip pages. She watched, horrified, as the view count climbed, each number a new stab of public shame. She felt exposed, violated, as if her soul had been stripped bare and paraded before a gleeful, mocking audience. Her voice, the one thing that truly belonged to her, had been stolen and weaponized. Freshmart, a place that had already been a cage, now felt like a public spectacle. The thought of facing her colleagues, of meeting the eyes of customers who had undoubtedly seen the video, made her stomach churn with nausea. She considered calling in sick, retreating into the false safety of her apartment. But the image of her grandmother's frail hands, the pile of bills on the kitchen table, spurred her on. She couldn't afford to lose this job. She had to face the music, however discordant. When she arrived at Fresh Mart, the air was thick with unspoken tension. Colleagues avoided her gaze, their hushed whispers silencing abruptly as she passed. Customers, usually absorbed in their shopping, stole furtive glances, a few even holding their phones, their screens suspiciously dark as she approached. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of humiliation. She felt like a specimen under a microscope, every movement scrutinized, every breath judged. Mr. Albright, his face a thundercloud of disapproval, summoned her to his office within minutes of her clocking in. The small room, usually a sterile den of bureaucracy, felt like a public interrogation chamber. He stood behind his desk, arms crossed, his bald head gleaming under the harsh office light. His thin lips were pressed into a rigid line of barely contained fury. "Alara," he began, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "Do you know why you are here?" Alara stared at her hands, clasped tightly in her lap. "Yes, Mr. Albright," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The video, he repeated, his voice laced with venom. "A video of you, singing, in the Fresh Mart parking lot. A video that has, I am told, gone viral. Do you have any idea how unprofessional this is, Alara? How this reflects on the Fresh Mart brand? We are a respectable establishment, not some roadside karaoke bar." He slammed his palm flat on the desk, the sudden noise making her jump. "I've had calls, Alara, from corporate, from concerned customers. People asking if this is the new standard of professionalism at Fresh Mart. This is a PR nightmare, a complete embarrassment." He paced behind his desk, his anger building with every step. "And what were you even singing a gospel hymn? This is a grocery store, Alara, not a church. We have a diverse clientele. You can't be doing that." The irony was almost unbearable. He wasn't upset by the bullying, by the public humiliation she had suffered. He was only concerned with the damage to Fresh Mart's carefully manicured corporate image, to the sanctity of his sterile, profit-driven world. "Understand, Mr. Albright," Alara said, her voice strained. I was having a bad day. I didn't think anyone would hear. I'm so sorry." "Sorry isn't going to cut it, Alara," he snapped, leaning over the desk, his face inches from hers. "You have compromised the Fresh Mart brand. This is a formal warning. One more incident, one more performance, and I will have no choice but to terminate your employment. Do you understand?" Alara nodded, her eyes burning with unshed tears. "Yes, Mr. Albright." She felt a fresh wave of despair. She was trapped between her dreams and her responsibilities, between her love for her grandmother and the crushing weight of this job. The bullies had won. They had not only stolen her voice, but had now threatened her very livelihood. As she walked back to her register, her head held high despite the burning shame, she knew that every eye in the store was on her. She was now branded, her humiliation etched into the collective consciousness of the town. Her quiet life, her safe anonymity, had been shattered. The silent solace of her singing, once her greatest comfort, had been exposed as her greatest vulnerability. The battle for her spirit had begun, and she was, to all appearances, losing. The days that followed were a relentless assault on Alara's spirit. The viral video became the instrument of her ongoing torment, a public spectacle that the bullies, Ashley and Derek, relentlessly amplified. They reveled in her discomfort, their faces lit with a cruel satisfaction that made her stomach clench. Ashley, leveraging her formidable social media presence, continued to post updates, screenshots of comment threads, and snide remarks, turning Alara into the town's public punching bag. She'd write captions like, "Looks like our Fresh Mart diva is still hitting all the wrong notes. Maybe stick to scanning, sweetie," or "Heard a certain cashier might be looking for a new gig outside of the Fresh Mart stage. Any karaoke bars hiring." Each post was a fresh stab, designed to chip away at Alara's already fragile self-confidence, to remind her that she was constantly being watched, constantly judged. Derek, less sophisticated but equally malicious, resorted to in-person taunts. He and his football cronies would deliberately choose Alara's checkout lane, then make loud, performative requests for her to sing them a song while snickering. They'd sing off-key renditions of hymns, mocking her, their laughter booming through the aisles. Sometimes, they'd even record her silent, humiliated reactions, promising to add them to the sequel video. Mr. Albright, terrified of further corporate scrutiny, became even more rigid, more punitive. He assigned Alara the worst shifts, the most grueling tasks, treating her with a thinly veiled contempt that bordered on disgust. He'd hover over her, scrutinizing every movement, waiting for the slightest misstep, ready to pounce. His frequent public reprimands, ostensibly about her work performance, were really about punishing her for the embarrassment she had caused Freshmart. He saw her as a ticking time bomb, a liability that needed to be contained, then discarded. The weight of it all was crushing. Alara found herself unable to sing even in the privacy of her apartment. Her voice, once her solace, felt contaminated, stripped of its joy. The vibrant river had turned into a stagnant pond, choked by the weeds of humiliation and despair. She felt a profound sense of isolation. Her colleagues, most of whom were too afraid of Albright or Ashley's clique to offer direct support, averted their gazes. A few offered brief, whispered words of sympathy, but they were empty gestures against the tide of public mockery. Sarah, the quiet cashier from Register 2, would sometimes offer a silent, knowing look, a shared glance of empathy that provided a tiny flicker of comfort. But it wasn't enough to stem the tide. Alara's grandmother, whose eyes had always been a source of unwavering love, sensed her granddaughter's deepening unhappiness. "What troubles you, child?" she'd ask, her voice frail but steady. Alara would offer vague assurances, unwilling to burden her with the ugliness of her public shame. She couldn't bear to see the sorrow in her grandmother's eyes, the reflection of her own crushed spirit. The bullying escalated further when Ashley decided to organize a talent show at school, announcing it with a thinly veiled jab at Alara. "For those of us with actual talent, unlike certain grocery store performers." The entire school, and much of the town, understood the malicious intent. It was a cruel, public performance designed to rub salt in Alara's wounds, to remind her of her perceived failure. Alara felt a deep, wrenching pain. They weren't just tormenting her. They were actively trying to strip away her identity, to convince her that her dream, her very voice, was something to be ashamed of. The indignity was almost unbearable. One particularly draining afternoon, after a shift filled with taunts and Albright's incessant scrutiny, Alara found herself in the break room, trying to force down a cold sandwich. The TV, always tuned to the local news channel, blared a segment about community heroes, people who had overcome adversity. The segment featured a shy, unassuming woman who had started a soup kitchen from nothing. Alara looked at her own trembling hands, at the half-eaten sandwich, and felt a profound sense of inadequacy. She was no hero. She was just a target, a victim. But as she watched the woman on screen, resolute despite her struggles, a tiny spark, an ember of defiance, began to glow deep within her. She might be broken, but she wasn't shattered. Not yet. She was still standing. And somewhere, deep within her, a quiet, stubborn voice whispered, "They haven't won." Not yet. It was a desperate, almost silent promise, but it was enough to keep her going, to make her push through one more miserable shift, to endure one more public humiliation. The fight for her spirit was far from over. The constant barrage of humiliation from Ashley and Derek, amplified by Mr. Albright's passive-aggressive cruelty, pushed Alara to the brink. She felt like a bird whose wings had been clipped, left to fall from the sky. The joy had seeped out of her singing, leaving only a hollow echo. She still hummed sometimes, almost subconsciously, but the melodies felt heavy, tainted by the memory of the parking lot. Her once vibrant voice now sounded muted even to her own ears. Her grandmother, frail but observant, watched Alara's retreat into herself with growing concern. One evening, As Alara sat silently, picking at her dinner, her grandmother reached across the table and took her hand. Her grip, though weak, was firm. "Alara," she said, her voice raspy with age, but resonating with an unwavering faith. "Your voice is a gift from above. It brings comfort, it brings hope. No one could take that from you. Not a cruel word, not a foolish video. The true beauty of music is not in the applause, but in the heart from which it comes. Never forget that, child." Her words were a balm to Alara's wounded spirit, a gentle reminder of a truth she had almost forgotten. A small, almost imperceptible flicker of light returned to her eyes. The next day, at Freshmart, the air was particularly thick with the usual cocktail of corporate apathy and social cruelty. Ashley and Derek, emboldened by their seeming triumph, arrived with a portable speaker, intending to play a heavily distorted, auto-tuned version of Alara's parking lot song whenever she opened her mouth. They were pushing her, trying to provoke a reaction, to break her completely. Mr. Albright, of course, pretended not to notice, absorbed in his clipboard. Just as Ashley was about to unleash her sonic weapon, a small, unassuming figure emerged from the dairy aisle. It was an elderly woman, Mrs. Gable, a regular customer known for her quiet demeanor and her sharp, intelligent eyes. She had been observing the bullying for weeks, her disapproval growing with each cruel act. She had seen the raw, unedited beauty of Alara's voice that night in the parking lot, before the cruel laughter had drowned it out. She had been disturbed by the way the video was edited, cut to emphasize the mockery. She had also heard the soft, soulful hums Alara sometimes let slip when she thought no one was listening, melodies that tugged at her own old heart. And she had made a decision. She walked directly to Alara's register, her movements slow but deliberate. She didn't look at Ashley or Derek. Her gaze was fixed solely on Alara, her eyes filled with an empathetic understanding that surprised Alara. As Alara scanned her groceries, Mrs. Gable spoke, her voice low but clear enough to be heard over the background hum of the store. "Alara," she said, "I heard you sing that night. In the parking lot." Alara's face flushed with renewed shame, her hand pausing on a carton of milk. Mrs. Gable, however, didn't stop. "It was beautiful, child," she continued, her voice filled with a quiet conviction. "Truly beautiful. A pure voice, full of heart. You should never let anyone tell you otherwise." Ashley, overhearing this, let out a sneer. "Oh, please. It was a joke, lady. She can't sing for real." Mrs. Gable turned her gaze on Ashley, her eyes, usually soft, now glinting with a steely resolve. "True beauty, young lady," she said, her voice cutting through Ashley's arrogance, "is not something that can be auto-tuned or photoshopped. It comes from the soul, and it certainly cannot be found in the mockery of others." She then turned back to Alara. "I want you to know, dear, that some of us heard the real song, not the edited version, not the one covered by cruel laughter. We heard your heart." As Mrs. Gable finished, she leaned in slightly, a subtle, almost imperceptible movement. Her hand, wrinkled with age, reached into her purse. She didn't pull out money. Instead, her fingers brushed against Alara's own, leaving behind a small, flat object. It was a tiny, unmarked flash drive, cold and smooth against Alara's skin. Mrs. Gable gave Alara a brief, meaningful look, then a tiny, encouraging nod. Sometimes, she whispered, her voice barely audible, "The world needs to hear the truth, the unedited truth." She then paid for her groceries, and with another small, gentle smile, walked out of the store, leaving Alara staring at the tiny flash drive in her palm, her heart beginning to pound with a strange mixture of confusion and a nascent, terrifying hope. The meaning was clear. Mrs. Gable had recorded the original, unedited version of Alara's singing. The real song, the one before the cruel laughter. This was a lifeline, a glimmer of light in the overwhelming darkness, a weapon against the bullies who thought they had extinguished her spirit. The quiet intervention, the simple act of a compassionate stranger, was the inciting incident for a rebellion Alara didn't know she was capable of. The balance of power had just shifted, subtly, irrevocably. Alara clutched the tiny flash drive, its smooth surface a tangible connection to the fragile hope that had just been handed to her. Mrs. Gable's words, the unedited truth, echoed in her mind, a powerful counter-narrative to the relentless humiliation she had endured. Her hands trembled as she finished her shift, her mind racing. She processed the groceries, scanned the items, her movements mechanical, but her thoughts were a whirlwind of possibility. When her shift finally ended, she practically ran to her apartment, the flash drive clutched tightly in her palm. Her grandmother was already asleep, a soft, rhythmic breathing filling the quiet room. Alara tiptoed to her old, clunky laptop, its screen flickering to life with a familiar groan. Her fingers, usually hesitant with technology, moved with a newfound determination as she inserted the flash drive into the USB port. A file appeared, simply labeled Alara's song. With a pounding heart, she clicked on it. The first few seconds were filled with the gentle, almost ethereal sound of her own voice, pure and resonant, singing the old gospel hymn in the quiet twilight of the Fresh Mart parking lot. It was just as she remembered it, raw and vulnerable, but undeniably beautiful. Then, the sound of the SUV pulling up, the sudden glare of the headlights, the abrupt, choked silence of her own voice. And then, the cruel, mocking laughter of Ashley and Derek, their taunts, their sneering commentary. All of it exactly as it had happened. But then a subtle shift occurred. The video, instead of cutting away or focusing on the bully's triumph, continued to play, showing the entire unedited sequence. It captured the way her shoulders had slumped, the way her face had crumpled in shame, the genuine tears that had streamed down her face as they drove away. It showed her vulnerability, her raw humiliation, in excruciating detail. It didn't glorify her. It simply presented the unvarnished truth of the moment. And then, the true power of the video revealed itself. Mrs. Gable's recording had continued after Ashley and Derek drove away. It captured the lingering echo of her unfinished song, the quiet of the parking lot after the mockery had faded, Alara's silent sobs, and then, slowly, haltingly, the sound of her voice rising again, broken but defiant, completing the hymn she had started. It was a raw, unpolished, profoundly emotional performance, infused with a heartbreaking beauty born of her resilience. The technical skill wasn't perfect, but the soul behind it was undeniable. It was the sound of a spirit refusing to be crushed, a voice reclaiming itself in the face of immense pain. A single tear traced a path down Alara's cheek as she watched and listened. It wasn't a tear of shame or humiliation, but of profound recognition. This was the truth. This was her story, not the one the bullies wanted to tell, but the real one. Mrs. Gable, with her quiet act of defiance, had given her a weapon, a shield, and a voice. She had captured the entire context, the full, devastating reality of the bully's cruelty juxtaposed with Alara's raw, indomitable spirit. This wasn't just a video of her singing. It was a testament to her courage. With a newfound resolve, a steel forming in her spine that she hadn't known she possessed, Alara knew what she had to do. She couldn't just keep this video to herself. The world needed to see the full truth. The world needed to hear the real song. She uploaded the unedited video to a new, anonymous social media account she created, adding a simple caption, "The full story, the real song, the unedited truth." She didn't tag anyone, didn't make any accusations. She just put it out there, a quiet challenge to the manufactured narrative. She then deleted the video from the flash drive, returned it to its unmarked envelope, and placed it under her grandmother's pillow. A silent thank you. The next morning, the internet, that same unforgiving beast, stirred again. But this time it was different. People who had initially laughed at Ashley's video, who had dismissed Alara as a joke, were now confronted with the raw, emotional truth. The contrast between Alara's genuine vulnerability and the bully's blatant cruelty was stark, undeniable. The sympathy she had initially lacked now flowed in a torrential wave. The comments shifted from mockery to outrage. "This is disgusting. What kind of monsters do that to someone? Her voice is incredible. They're just jealous." The video, now stripped of its cruel context, began to spread even faster than the first, but this time fueled by empathy and indignation. It wasn't just a video, it was a movement. Alara, watching the comments and shares multiply, felt a terrifying mix of elation and apprehension. The spotlight was on her again, but this time it felt different. This time, she wasn't alone. This time, the truth was on her side. The unedited video, raw and unfiltered, became a phenomenon. It wasn't just going viral. It was exploding, propelled by a collective wave of outrage and a profound empathy for Alara. The sheer contrast between her vulnerable, authentic talent and the bully's calculated cruelty struck a nerve. The internet, often a cesspool of negativity, had for once turned its immense power into a force for justice. The comments section of the new video became a digital battlefield. Initially, a few of Ashley's loyal followers tried to defend her, dismissing the video as fake or overblown. But the sheer volume of new comments expressing disgust and admiration drowned them out. People were sharing the video with captions like, "This is what real bullying looks like," and "Her voice gave me chills, they're just vile." Hashtags like hashtag voice of truth and hashtag justice for Alara began a trend, spreading far beyond the confines of Harmony Creek. Alara watched it all unfold from her small apartment, a mixture of terror and exhilaration churning in her stomach. She still felt exposed, but now it was a different kind of exposure, one tinged with validation. Anonymous strangers from across the country and even the world were seeing her, truly seeing her, and hearing her voice, truly hearing it, unmarred by mockery. And they were fighting for her. Ashley, Derek, and their clique, accustomed to reigning supreme in their social media kingdom, were suddenly confronted by a digital rebellion they couldn't control. Their carefully curated online personas began to crack under the relentless onslaught of negative comments, hate mail, and direct accusations. Their own social media accounts, once platforms for their casual cruelty, became battlegrounds. Ashley tried to delete the new video, but it had already been downloaded and re-uploaded hundreds of times. She tried to block negative commenters, but new ones appeared by the thousands. Her perfect online world was collapsing around her, exposed as a facade built on the suffering of others. Derek, less accustomed to intellectual warfare, resorted to aggressive, threatening messages, only to have them screenshotted and shared, further incriminating him and solidifying his image as a thuggish bully. Mr. Albright, completely blindsided by this unexpected turn of events, panicked. He had thought he had contained the problem, had punished Alara into submission. Now, Freshmart was trending not for its organic kale, but for its role in a viral bullying scandal. He frantically tried to contact Ashley and Derek's parents, hoping they could somehow make the internet disappear. But the tide had turned, and the internet, once unleashed, was merciless. News outlets, initially dismissive of a local high school drama, picked up the story, drawn by the viral momentum and the clear David and Goliath narrative. Local TV news vans began to gather outside Freshmart, their satellite dishes pointed ominously towards the sky. Reporters, their faces grim, interviewed outraged customers and sympathetic colleagues. The story wasn't just about a cashier anymore. It was about bullying, about corporate complicity, about the power of the internet to expose truth. Amidst the chaos, a quiet, almost imperceptible shift began to happen in the world of professional music. In a high-rise office building in Nashville, Marcus Thorne, a seasoned talent scout for a major record label known for his uncanny ability to spot raw, authentic talent, stumbled upon the video. He had seen thousands of viral sensations come and go, most of them fleeting novelties. But Alara's voice, raw and vulnerable yet undeniably powerful in that unedited clip, resonated with something deeper within him. He watched it repeatedly, captivated not just by the melody, but by the story behind it. The raw emotion conveyed through her eyes, the defiance in her voice as she finished the hymn despite the humiliation. This wasn't just a voice, it was a soul laid bare. He saw past the grainy footage, past the cruel laughter, to the pure, unadulterated artistry that lay beneath. His instincts, honed by decades in the industry, screamed at him. This was rare. This was real. This was a talent that needed to be heard properly, respectfully. He immediately dispatched his team to investigate. Not just her voice, but her story. He wanted to know everything about Ilara Vance, the quiet cashier from Freshmart. He wanted to understand the woman behind the voice, the spirit that had refused to be silenced. The wheels of a much larger, much more powerful machine had just begun to turn, quietly, efficiently, in the background, setting the stage for a confrontation that would rock Harmony Creek to its core and change Ilara's fate forever. The climax was no longer just about vindication. It was about destiny. The news vans parked outside Freshmart were a physical manifestation of the storm brewing around Ilara. Their flickering lights cast an ominous glow on the store's familiar facade, transforming it from a mundane grocery store into the epicenter of a media frenzy. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocating. Customers whispered, reporters, disguised as shoppers, subtly interviewed employees, and Mr. Albright, a man perpetually on the verge of a nervous breakdown, barked orders with increasing desperation, trying to project an air of normalcy that had long since vanished. Ilara, despite the public vindication, still felt raw, exposed. The internet support was a powerful balm, but the constant scrutiny, the fear of what would happen next, weighed heavily on her. She still came to work, clinging to the familiar routine, but every minute felt like an endurance test. She knew that the final confrontation with Mr. Albright was inevitable. He couldn't sustain this level of chaos, and he wouldn't hesitate to make her the scapegoat. The corporate axe was poised, ready to fall. Her grandmother, seeing the turmoil, had been a pillar of quiet strength. She held Ilara's hand, listened patiently, and offered simple, profound truths that anchored her granddaughter's spirit in the storm. The light, she'd say, always finds its way through the cracks, child, and your light is too bright to be hidden. The morning of the inevitable confrontation arrived with an eerie calm. Ilara had just finished stocking the cereal aisle when Mr. Albright's voice, a tight, strangled whisper, called her name over the intercom. Ilara Vance, to my office. Immediately. This wasn't a warning, it was a summons. She knew. This was it. Her last day at Freshmart. She walked to his office, her shoulders straight, a quiet defiance growing in her heart. She was done being a victim. She might lose her job, but she would leave with her dignity intact. As she approached his office door, she heard voices inside. Not just Albright's. Two other voices, one smooth and condescending, the other loud and arrogant. Ashley and Derek. They were here, personally, to witness her demise, to twist the knife one last time. She pushed open the door. The office was small, claustrophobic. Mr. Albright sat stiffly behind his desk, his face a pale, clammy mask of anxiety. Ashley and Derek were perched on the guest chairs, their faces radiating a smug, triumphant satisfaction. Ashley smirked, a cruel glint in her eyes. Well, she purred. Looks like our little diva's final curtain call. Derek let out a snicker. Mr. Albright cleared his throat, avoiding Ilara's gaze. Ilara, he began, his voice barely audible. This is a very difficult conversation. The recent incidents have caused significant disruption to Freshmart operations. And after careful consideration, corporate has decided that your employment is no longer tenable. We're going to have to let you go. He placed a termination letter on the desk, his hand trembling slightly. Ilara felt a dull throb of pain, but it was quickly overshadowed by a surge of righteous indignation. She had been betrayed, sacrificed to protect the corporate image and the powerful children of influential parents. So, this is it, Ilara said, her voice clear and steady, surprising even herself. You're firing me, not for my work, but because I was humiliated, and because that humiliation drew attention to your inability to control your customers, Mr. Albright. Ashley laughed, a sharp, unfeeling sound. Oh, boo-hoo, Ilara. It's called consequences. Maybe next time, you'll know your place. My place, Ilara retorted, her voice rising, a newfound fire in her eyes. She looked at Ashley, then at Derek, then back at the trembling Albright. My place is not to be humiliated for your amusement. My place is not to be silenced by your cruelty. And my place is certainly not to be dismissed by a manager who prioritizes corporate image over decency. Just as the tension reached its breaking point, a sharp, authoritative knock sounded on the office door. Mr. Albright flinched, startled. Before he could respond, the door swung open. Standing in the doorway were two impeccably dressed figures. One was a tall, distinguished man in a perfectly tailored suit, his silver hair swept back from a kind, intelligent face. This was Marcus Thorne, the talent scout. The other was a woman in a formidable power suit, carrying a sleek briefcase, her expression unreadable but radiating quiet competence. This was Thorne's legal counsel. Behind them, visible in the hallway, were two more figures, a burly security guard and a local reporter whose eyes, wide with surprise, had just caught sight of the scene unfolding in Albright's office. Marcus Thorne stepped into the room, his gaze sweeping over Ashley's sneering face, Derek's arrogant smirk, Albright's panicked expression, and finally settling on Alara, his eyes filled with a profound respect. The presence of these unexpected, powerful figures instantly changed the atmosphere. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. The power dynamics, previously so clearly defined by Albright and the bullies, were suddenly shattered, leaving everyone else stunned, caught in the sudden, silent shift. The entrance of Marcus Thorne and his legal counsel sent a jolt of ice through Ashley, Derek, and Mr. Albright. Their smug expressions dissolved, replaced by a mixture of confusion and dawning apprehension. The quiet confidence, the tailored suits, the aura of undeniable authority. These were not people who frequented Freshmart's customer service desk. These were people of a different world, a world of power and influence that even Ashley's parents couldn't easily navigate. Marcus Thorne, his gaze sweeping over the scene, felt a surge of indignation. He had seen the raw talent in Alara's video, but now, seeing the setting, the faces of her tormentors, and the termination letter on the desk, he felt a powerful, protective instinct. He was here not just for a talent acquisition. He was here for justice. "Mr. Albright, I presume?" Thorne said, his voice calm, but with an underlying steel that commanded attention. Albright, flustered, stammered, "Yes, that's me. And you are?" "My name is Marcus Thorne," he replied, his voice clear. "And this is my legal counsel, Ms. Davies. We are here on behalf of Vanguard Records, and we are here regarding Ms. Alara Vance." The name Vanguard Records hit the room like a sonic boom. It was one of the biggest record labels in the country, a name synonymous with superstardom. Albright's jaw dropped. Ashley and Derek's eyes widened in stunned disbelief, their smugness completely obliterated. The termination letter on the desk suddenly looked like a pathetic joke. "Vanguard Records?" Albright stammered, his face paling, sweat beading on his bald head. I don't understand. She's just a cashier." "She's not just a cashier, Mr. Albright," Thorne corrected him, his voice hardening. "Ms. Vance is an exceptionally talented vocalist, a voice that has captivated millions online, a voice that we believe has the potential for true stardom." He then gestured to the termination letter. "And it seems, Mr. Albright, that you were just about to terminate the employment of a future recording artist represented by our label and arguably one of the most unjustly treated individuals on the internet right now." Ms. Davies, the lawyer, stepped forward, her voice crisp and authoritative. "Furthermore, Mr. Albright, we have been made aware of a pattern of harassment and a hostile work environment here at Freshmart, largely orchestrated by these two individuals." She gestured to Ashley and Derek, whose faces were now chalk white, "and, disturbingly, tolerated and even encouraged by your administration. We have collected extensive evidence, including witness statements from other employees, time-stamped video footage from within the store, and a comprehensive analysis of the social media bullying campaigns directed at Ms. Vance. The extent of this hostile work environment and the flagrant disregard for employee well-being is, frankly, shocking." She turned her piercing gaze on Ashley. "Ashley, isn't it? And Derek." We have also gathered substantial evidence of your online harassment and the emotional distress you have inflicted upon Ms. Vance. This behavior constitutes clear grounds for both civil litigation and, in some cases, criminal charges under cyberbullying statutes. Your parents, whose names are already connected to your online profiles, will be hearing from our legal team shortly regarding the potential damages and legal consequences of your actions. Ashley and Derek stared, utterly speechless, their power having evaporated into thin air. Their calculated cruelty, their carefully constructed kingdom of digital mockery, had just been exposed as a flimsy, illegal veneer. Their influential parents wouldn't be able to protect them from this. The true gravity of their actions, the potential ruin of their own futures, finally dawned on them. Albright, desperate, tried to salvage the situation. This is a misunderstanding. I was just following corporate policy. I can reevaluate. Alara, we can discuss a promotion, perhaps a raise. No, Mr. Albright, Alara said, her voice clear and strong, cutting through his pathetic bluster. She stood taller now, her shoulders back, her eyes shining with a profound sense of vindication. My employment here is no longer tenable. But it's not because of you. It's because I have a different path. She looked at Marcus Thorne, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and wonder. I'm ready to sing. For real. Thorne smiled, a genuine, warm expression. Excellent. Ms. Davies has a preliminary contract ready for your review, Alara. And we'd like to begin recording demos immediately. Just as Thorne finished, the door to Albright's office was suddenly crowded with reporters who had been alerted by the security guard to the dramatic turn of events. Their cameras flashed, their microphones shoved forward. The story had exploded, not just for Alara, but for Freshmart, for Albright, and for the now terrified bullies. The tables had not merely turned. They had been utterly, spectacularly shattered, leaving the perpetrators exposed and powerless in the harsh glare of public scrutiny. The small office, once Mr. Albright's domain of petty tyranny, was now a whirlwind of flashing cameras and shouted questions. Reporters surged forward, their microphones thrust towards Marcus Thorne and Ms. Davies, their eyes alight with the scent of a major scoop. Albright, Ashley, and Derek were caught in the sudden, blinding spotlight, their faces frozen in masks of horror and disbelief. Their carefully constructed world had just imploded, and the very power they wielded, public exposure, was now turned against them with devastating force. Marcus Thorne, ever the professional, stepped forward, shielding Alara slightly. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice carrying authority and calm above the din, "my name is Marcus Thorne, and I represent Vanguard Records. We are incredibly excited to announce that we are offering a recording contract to Ms. Alara Vance, whose extraordinary talent has captured the hearts of millions around the world." The declaration sent another ripple of shock and excitement through the assembled media. A recording contract for the Freshmart cashier. The story had gone from a local bullying incident to a Cinderella tale unfolding in real time. Furthermore, Thorne continued, his voice hardening, we are fully aware of the egregious bullying and harassment that Ms. Vance has endured, both online and within this establishment. Vanguard Records takes the well-being of its artists very seriously. We will be pursuing all available legal avenues to ensure that those responsible are held fully accountable for their actions and that justice is served. He then gestured towards Ashley and Derek, his gaze chillingly direct. This includes the individuals responsible for the initial video and the ongoing campaign of malicious harassment. Ashley and Derek, cornered and terrified, began to stammer, to deny, to point fingers, but their words were lost in the flurry of questions from the reporters. Is this a PR stunt? Is she really that good? What about the school? What about the manager? Mr. Albright, pale and sweating, tried to regain some control, to bluster, but he was utterly outmatched. He was no longer the petty tyrant. He was a terrified, exposed man, caught in a corporate nightmare of his own making. As the reporters turned their attention to Albright, bombarding him with questions about the hostile work environment and Freshmart's complicity, Thorne gently took Alara's arm. Come on, "Elara," he said, his voice kind. "Let's get you out of here. Your new life is waiting." Elara nodded, a silent tear of overwhelming relief and gratitude tracing a path down her cheek. She looked at Albright, a defeated, pathetic figure shrinking under the media's glare. She looked at Ashley and Derek, their faces contorted in a mixture of terror and impotent rage, their arrogance finally shattered. And she felt no triumph, no desire for revenge, only a profound sense of vindication, a quiet understanding that justice had been served, not by her hands, but by the relentless power of truth. As she walked out of Albright's office, past the stunned reporters and flashing cameras, she saw Sarah, the kind cashier from Register 2, watching her from the main floor. Sarah offered her a small, knowing smile, a silent cheer for the underdog who had finally risen. Elara smiled back, a true, radiant smile that reached her eyes, a reflection of the hope that now bloomed in her heart. She wasn't just walking away from Freshmart. She was walking into a future she had only dared to dream of. The next few days were a blur of activity. Elara was whisked away to Nashville, plunged into a world of recording studios, music producers, and media interviews. Her story, a powerful narrative of resilience, authenticity, and triumph over bullying, resonated deeply with audiences around the globe. The unedited video of her singing continued to garner millions of views, transforming her from a viral sensation into a legitimate, respected artist. Her debut single, a soulful rendition of an old gospel hymn, topped the charts, its raw emotion and powerful message connecting with people on a visceral level. Back in Harmony Creek, the consequences for the bullies and Mr. Albright were swift and severe. Ashley and Derek faced public scorn, school disciplinary action, and a very real threat of legal action. Their social media empires crumbled, their carefully constructed images shattered, replaced by the ugly truth of their cruelty. Their families, unable to shield them from the relentless glare of public and legal scrutiny, were forced to confront the destructive nature of their children's entitlement. Mr. Albright, after a swift internal investigation by Freshmart Corporate, was summarily fired, his career as a manager in tatters. The chain of events, from his petty tyranny to his complicity in the bullying, was exposed, leaving him with no reputation and no job. The moral reckoning, fueled by public outrage and the unwavering pursuit of justice by Vanguard Records, was absolute. The town of Harmony Creek learned a powerful lesson about the hidden lives within its walls, about the quiet struggles and the vibrant dreams that often go unseen. They learned that kindness, even a small act from a quiet stranger like Mrs. Gable, could unleash a force more powerful than any malice. Elara's grandmother watched it all from her armchair, tears of pride in her eyes, her faith in her granddaughter, and in the enduring power of goodness, utterly vindicated. Elara's life transformed with a breathtaking speed that often felt surreal. One moment, she was scanning groceries. The next, she was standing in a state-of-the-art recording studio, her voice, once relegated to parking lots, now soaring through professional microphones. The silence of her small apartment was replaced by the exhilarating chaos of a recording schedule, interviews, and photo shoots. She embraced it all with a quiet grace, never forgetting where she came from or the journey that had brought her here. Her debut album, titled Unedited Truth, was a critical and commercial success. It was filled not just with her powerful vocals, but with songs that spoke of struggle, resilience, and the triumph of the human spirit. She used her platform not for revenge, but for advocacy, speaking out against bullying and promoting kindness, her story resonating with millions who had felt unseen or unheard. She became a voice for the voiceless, an inspiration to the underestimated. The record label, true to their word, continued to pursue legal action against Ashley and Derek. The lawsuit, publicized by the media, served as a stark warning to others. Ashley and Derek were subjected to intense public scrutiny, their private lives, once so carefully curated, now exposed as a testament to their casual cruelty. Ashley's carefully built social media empire crumbled, her followers abandoning her in droves, replaced by a torrent of justified outrage. Her privileged world, accustomed to effortless success, was introduced to the harsh realities of public accountability and legal consequences. Derek, stripped of his football scholarship and facing the humiliation of public scorn, learned that brute force and arrogance had no place in a world where truth could reach millions in an instant. Their futures, once so bright and entitled, were irrevocably tarnished, forcing them to confront the profound impact of their actions. Mr. Albright, having lost his job and his reputation, was a cautionary tale for petty tyrants everywhere. His downfall was swift and public, a testament to the fact that even seemingly small acts of complicity and cruelty can lead to devastating consequences when exposed to the light. Freshmart, under pressure from public outcry and corporate damage control, issued a public apology to Alera and implemented new, stricter policies against harassment and hostile work environments. The store, once a symbol of her quiet struggle, became a reminder of the powerful change that could be wrought by a single act of kindness and the courage to stand for what is right. Alera ensured that Mrs. Gable, her quiet savior, was acknowledged. She sent her concert tickets, flowers, and a heartfelt letter, but Mrs. Gable, ever humble, simply smiled and continued her quiet life, content in the knowledge that she had done her part. She preferred the satisfaction of knowing she had made a difference over any public recognition. Alera made sure to visit her grandmother often, bringing her new music, sharing stories from her incredible journey. Her grandmother, her eyes shining with pride, would simply nod, her frail hand reaching for Alera's. "I told you, child," she'd whisper, her voice soft. "Your light is too bright to be hidden." And she was right. Alera's voice, once a secret held in the quiet corners of a grocery store parking lot, now filled stadiums, graced airwaves, and brought hope to countless listeners. Her story, a testament to authenticity and resilience, became a beacon for anyone who had ever felt small, unheard, or unjustly treated. She learned that true power wasn't in silencing others, but in finding your own voice and using it to uplift, to inspire, to advocate for a more compassionate world. The parking lot, once the scene of her deepest humiliation, transformed into the birthplace of her destiny. It was a powerful, beautiful irony that echoed the profound truth of her journey, that sometimes it takes falling to the lowest point to discover the strength to soar to the highest heights, and that the quietest acts of kindness can unleash the loudest, most impactful change, turning suffering into triumph and humiliation into indelible legacy. The universe, in its own mysterious way, had indeed paid her back, not just for the song, but for the soul behind it.